Yeah, it's been a minute. I do appreciate the intro music. That's it's a nice touch.
Yeah, well, that's a new feature. Elon Musk is sprucing the place up a little bit. We certainly did not have that in the old days. We had to
Absolutely
make
not.
do. Yeah, I'm just going to kind of let the chat build up a little bit. I see we got FOIA fan. I definitely want to invite him to speak, and we'll see who else pops
Nice.
in. I think Fool Nelson said he might make an appearance. Walk of Fire was actually free the last couple of days. I don't know if he's free tonight, but we'll try to get as many people in here as we can. Try to, we kind of owe it, right? I mean, this was sort of our thing where we would do these spaces chats and talk about, the state of Russiagate and John Durham and everything else. And feels like we need to do at least one of these to kind of wrap things up a little bit now that Durham's done. And I'm sure we'll do a couple more of these as, Durham's going to testify and still a lot to talk about, still a lot of work to do. So, MB, I don't know if you want to just kick things off. I don't know if you have any thoughts on what you read from John Durham last week or um, anything really. Go
Sure.
ahead.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are disappointed, and it's not surprising. People are expecting more indictments for sure, more people being held accountable in a legal way, and that didn't happen. And it's we have no problem with being upset about that. And uh, I don't know if it's on John Durham that happened because he had limitations that I'm sure we'll talk about, and just issues that are part of our legal system that take it or leave it. That's what he had to deal with, and I'm sure other people want to jump in and say, he should have done what Mueller did or done what Wiseman did, be more aggressive, do things that were maybe outside of the lines a little bit, and that's fine. You can have that opinion, and I don't necessarily discount it, but um, we're at where we're at, and I think there are a lot of good things about what Durham did, and they are more about the future, the long term implications of how we look back at this and how history hopefully will look at it. And I'm sure people don't want to hear that necessarily. I'm upset. We're all not happy with the fact that a lot of people walked away from this unscathed, or maybe better off, maybe with you know TV shows and being on CNN and being commentators and God knows what else. But this is where we are, and I guess we'll hash it out and go sort of line by line. There's a lot of interesting things that have popped up, and I think the congressional uh, interviews are going to be very interesting, and hopefully pop up a few more things that'll uh, give us some more to talk about. But we're at where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. I think, there is a little bit of a disparity out there too, where, there's people that were definitely interested in this, but they weren't necessarily following every filing over the last 4 years. They weren't, really trying to dig into detail, and they really just felt like, okay, just go get Hillary, right? Just go indict her. Like, oh, you have the Q people out there that still talk about using military tribunals and all that stuff, and it's just, come on. But for those of us that have really been following this closely and really been doing research and trying to add material and finds to the body of discussion that's out there in the public, I don't think any of us were really thinking there was still going to be indictments at the end of this. I was starting to get a little bit curious about what Durham was doing, just because he was taking so long after the Danchenko trial. I had sort of assumed he would have finished his report sooner, and I was starting to get the idea that maybe he's still doing something. But at the end of the day, he submits a report. It's only like 300 pages. I am surprised at how short it is. And I think that's where a lot of disappointment comes in, because it's not just that he didn't bring accountability over so many different subjects. It's also that we didn't get the answers to so many questions. And even some of the most basic and earliest questions that were out there, Durham did not cover those at all. And there's questions that I don't even give credence to, right? There's questions about Seth Rich and questions about, Joseph Mifsud, and I give zero credence to those. I don't think they're worthwhile questions, but I think Durham would have done the country a service to address those and say, yes, I went and I looked at the body of evidence around Joseph Mifsud, and there was nothing there. He could have done that. We know that he looked at it, and he just didn't include that in his report. And then we talked about this quite a bit. I mean, for years now, we've known quite a bit about some of these other researchers and some of the other different subjects that they were involved in, and Durham did not cover that at all. I mean, there's some very interesting emails that we've obtained and we've had and we've discussed, and certainly along with Margot Cleveland, and we put out a lot of these materials, and then Durham did not address those at all. I thought that was really, really odd and very disappointing, because it really seemed like he limited his report to try to defend himself and just try to defend the court cases that he brought. I thought it was, if anything, it was sort of like a enhanced IG report, right? It wasn't like, there wasn't anything I could identify that was like, okay, this is what John Durham's been doing for the last 4 years, or like, this is what took him so long. There was nothing like that. I did not have that idea reading his report at all. And it's not even disappointing. It's almost confusing. It's confusing that he didn't address so many different topics. And I don't know. I don't know what he's doing. I don't know what's going to happen at this hearing, and nothing's been confirmed on that. Last I've seen, I don't know what time it is or anything, but I don't know. I don't think John Durham's the type of guy that's going to go into a hearing and be like, oh, and this is all the stuff I didn't include in the report. Like, this is all the new stuff. I don't think he's going to do it. He's going to probably stick to the report and be very, very limited in what new details he might give us. And that sort of leaves it all open for Congress. And I saw Cash and Devin are kind of nudging Congress to go and do something. And I have to say, I totally support that. And that's been one of the first things we've really been pushing for, is for Congress to go out and do something, have some hearings, subpoena some people, subpoena some documents, and go look at stuff. And let's put everything on the table finally. And maybe a silver lining to John Durham being so sparse in his report and leaving so much open, maybe it does prompt Congress to say, okay, there's enough anger out there. Maybe we have to go and do something, because there are some really serious questions and worthwhile questions that are just not addressed. It's not, no, we looked at this and there's nothing there. It's just totally not addressed. And I can't come to terms with that. It's probably a long intro.
No, no, I think you're on the button. One thing I wanted to kind of put on the floor right now is that think about things from John Durham's point of view. That this investigation has been going on a long time, and as soon as Biden won the election, and you have a new attorney general who's in charge of this, he had to figure out, how am I going to get this stuff out in the public, because he can't just put out a report and send it to Congress. It has to go through the attorney general first, right? So from his point of view, it's that was tricky, because he can't put, things from the grand jury in it, because those are secret. And he can't even put, a lot of things that might be classified, or might, the attorney general might think is, or shouldn't be involved. So I think if you look at it from that prism of John Durham wants to get information out, but he has a adversarial relationship potentially with the attorney general, and how can he work this out to get things out? And then we get to the point where, okay, he's been working this report for months. It's like, the Danchenko trial ended more than 6 months ago, like eight months ago, whatever it was. And he's been working on this. And then all of a sudden he turns the report in, and the attorney general turns it around on a Friday, or he gives it to him on a Friday, and it's released on a Monday. And that to me says that they had been working sort of on a deal, some sort of arrangement where it's like, yeah, we don't want to take forever. We don't, we're not going to do what the Mueller report was with Barr, where we have to go back and redact a bunch of things. What's it going to take to turn this around very quickly? And clearly 3 days is very quickly to turn around this report. So there was some sort of working accommodation arrangement. And I'm not saying it was anything nefarious at all. I'm just saying, clearly, in my opinion, Durham had an arrangement with Garland that I'm going to put this out under these, you know, whatever, that it's not going to take a long time to redact a bunch of things where we're going to get it out right away. So that being said, this is what we have. And if you look at through it in that prism, it's, I don't know. I don't know if that's interesting or what, but clearly there wasn't a big fight with the Attorney General of Biden's regime to get this information out. So take that for what it's worth.
See, I'm not convinced there was an agreement. I think there's, Garland certainly committed publicly that he was going to try to release this report without redactions. And, maybe Durham just submitted a really sparse report, and Garland looked it over and he was like, yeah, there's nothing here. I can release this in total. And certainly Durham made that very, very easy for him. That is a good point, because some of the subjects that, I'm personally very curious in are probably still classified. And maybe, by submitting a report like this, they could get it out a little bit faster. They didn't have to go through that declassification, system or process. But at the same time, like I just really, really struggle with it, because some of the classified subjects that I'm personally very interested in, they're worthwhile. Like, you just have to put it out there. Like, and what I'm sort of concerned about for Durham, who I totally respect, is a situation where something new comes out. And you know what? There's stuff that we have that Durham does not have in his report. And if I can get a little bit more detail on some of those subjects, it's gonna make Durham look bad, quite honestly. I mean, if he doesn't address it in this hearing, and then I come out and I can report it, with some more documents and, show the truth on a couple of things that are really, really important, and I think I will, people are going to be like, WTF, John Durham, like, why didn't you have this in your report? And like, I hate that for Mr. Durham. Like, I hate that. Like, I don't want it to be a situation where people are cursing his name and being disrespectful to him, because I have the utmost respect for him. And what he did is not easy. Like, this was not like a fun assignment. I guarantee you, Durham was not ever happy to collect a paycheck while, being away from his family and dealing with all this. Like, this was not a happy engagement. And, there's some troubling, like, there's so much that he should have covered. And I'm going to say that so many more times. That's, I'm so confused. And, I hope that, half of this hearing, whenever Durham testifies, we know half of it's just going to be wasted, right? We know the Democrats are going to be out there and they're just going to say, they're just going to be ripping John Durham apart. They're going to be making whatever garbage idea or case they have. And then of the 50% of the remaining time, I'm concerned that we're probably going to have a lot of Congress members on the Republican side that are just going to grandstand. And all they're basically going to do is try to say, oh, this is the worst thing ever. And they're not going to dig into the details. And they're not going to ask them the hard questions and the questions that are obvious just in the FOIA documents that we have. And I'm scared that so many years have passed and so much has gone on that we are not going to get the answers to all this unless we literally go and get them, unless we literally go get these answers. And, I'm certainly working on it, but like, I never anticipated being in that situation. And that's it's just crazy. So.
Yeah, we should probably talk about the upside of all of this. That, look, Durham's come back and really had a damning report about not just the Clintons, which I think he really went hard on, but also clearly the intelligence community, the FBI, the DOJ, and the Obama administration. And maybe they were not criminally liable, or he was not able to prove that, beyond a reasonable doubt, or, in ways that were criminal, but he came down very hard on the entire complex of uh, especially the what they call it, the Clinton, the was it Clinton program? What did they had a name for it? I mean, it was, they had a foreign intelligence agency that came to the CIA and said, "Hey, we intercepted something that said that the Clintons were, or that Hillary Clinton's campaign was going to try to pin on Donald Trump that he was working with the Russians, and that was something they were going to do for the campaign, and that got passed up to literally to the president, to Obama. Biden was in the meeting, all these different people that play in, and I think that was probably it's amazing that that's not a bombshell that is just not rattling everybody's cage in the entire country. It's kind of gotten to the point where it's like, yeah, well, okay, maybe that's true. Maybe it makes sense. That probably it happened, whatever. And people just, we're so down the line that people are just like, yeah, okay. They don't really care all that much because everything, it's kind of one of things that is happening, that has happened. But that is a huge deal. And I don't know that it's been proven beyond a reasonable doubt because it's all this intelligence stuff. It's IC, it's whatever, but they were briefed on that. That's a fact. So it's not about what's true. It's about what they were told that they should have taken into account. And that includes Jim Comey. That includes the DOJ and the FBI. They were told these things, and then they went ahead and absolutely ignored it. And it just, as though it was a blank slate, they took all this stuff about Donald Trump and took it as, oh, this came out of the blue. Like, you were briefed that the Clintons were going to try a dirty trick like this, and you completely ignored it. And to me, that's a huge deal. If that would have come out 5 years ago, it probably would have been a way bigger bombshell. But we're so far down the line that I think it just has lost its impact.
Well, I think that's a great point, and it is such an important point to make because you have these you have these guys at the FBI. You have Comey, you have McCabe, you have Peter Strzok, you know, Priestap's probably in the mix too, where they know, right? They know about this plan from Hillary Clinton to tie Trump to Russia. So then, once they start going down the line, and they have the Steele dossier and they have all these allegations and stuff. Once stuff stops panning out or never pans out, when do they reassess that, right? Like, it's like, okay, all this stuff is blowing up in the media. There's all these leaks that did not come from us. We know these leaks are garbage. We know, Peter Strzok did an analysis on one of these New York Times pieces, and he's like, no, this is totally wrong. Like, this, it's so obvious. Like, somebody's just planning this narrative, and, all the evidence is garbage. And, like, you can tell all this stuff is fabricated and it's not panning out. So there has to be a point when somebody like Peter Strzok and Comey and McCabe are like, we heard this was like a plan from Hillary Clinton, and nothing's panning out, nothing's making sense. Is it possible Hillary Clinton fabricated all this? And they had to get there probably well before Mueller was even appointed. And that's like the crazy thing, because if you have reasonable suspicion that Hillary Clinton is behind all this stuff, like, why don't you shut everything down? And like, I just don't accept that. Okay, on at the start of things, you find out, you get this report that Hillary Clinton's behind everything. You're like, I don't think so. But later on down the line, once everything is blown up in your face, you have to be like, maybe somebody is out there fabricating this stuff. And it's like, okay, who is that somebody? Well, I heard it was Hillary Clinton. Like, why doesn't that thought ever hit these guys? And the only, like, it leads to some pretty negative inferences about what their intentions have to be. I mean, it just has to be that way, because there is no good explanation for why you would not stop or shut things down when everything's blown up in your face.
Yeah, you would think there would be some professional embarrassment when you're investigating all these things and you're going out on a limb, and all of a sudden they're swearing up and down that the Steele dossier was not paid for by anybody in the DNC or Hillary Clinton, that Fusion had nothing to do with it. And it took until the Republicans in Congress went and got the bank records and literally proved that Fusion GPS was being paid by Hillary Clinton. That's how long it took before they just turned on a dime and said, yeah, that happened. They were lying. I mean, they were absolutely straight up to people's faces lying about who was paying for the Steele dossier. And then they got caught. But no one, like, if, at that point, if, some of the guys, if Peter Strzok or, McCabe or Comey would have gone, wow, holy crap, we didn't know that, and that changes everything. No, they just dug in. They doubled down at that point. That to me is just the most outrageous. You're supposed to be investigators. You're supposed to, that should have been that should have been something that just like infuriated them. And instead they just went, yeah, that's fine, whatever. It's outrageous.
Yeah, I mean, circling back to the report itself, I mean, is there anything that you can recall as you read through the report or maybe somebody's Twitter feeds? Is there anything new? Is there anything that you learned from Durham's final report?
There were a couple things, and I don't want to say they're breadcrumbs because maybe they are, maybe they're not, but they're interesting. And the one we're talking about is it really goes back to some of the other Clinton investigations. I think those were the ones that stuck out to me, and the way that the FBI was treating things that were going on with the Clintons, and especially in late 2015, early 2016. Those were new to me. And they were, some things that were going on with confidential human sources in that time frame. People, there was potentially bribes being made from foreign countries to the Clinton campaign that the FBI, according to Durham, they were just shut down at a certain time. And I'm very curious about that. And I'm not even 100% that this is everything at face value. But I find it very interesting, and that Durham would put that in the report because, Undead, like you just said, he left out quite a bit of things that were germane that we've talked about that were even in the court filings and things like that. But he included that. He included the things that he included and didn't include, I think, are interesting. And I'm very interested in that particular little bit that, were things happening that the FBI ignored with the Clintons or said, we can't do this. That might be our next president. She might be our next president. So we would be fools to, push too hard on this. I think they should be run down. I think they will be run down.
Yeah, I think that's the only thing that I could really recall as something that really stood out. I mean, there's a couple other points, right? I mean, we didn't have all the detail. He certainly included a little bit more on like CHSS, which we were talking about a little bit with Patrick Byrne and some of that other stuff. But like, just like you said, like it's weird to me that he included some detail on some of that stuff, and then other topics that are really important, he has zero coverage at all. I thought, that's kind of odd. I thought it was odd that he didn't, like, there's open questions, right? Like, let's talk about Alpha Bank a little bit. And I do have to go back and reread that section a little bit, but it felt like, there's one point that he made it where he's talking about Listrak and basically saying that based on what Listrak had said, there's no way these DNS lookups could have happened because it would have taken like a reconfiguration of their server, and that reconfiguration would have been done with like physical access, I think he said, and it would have shown up in other like activity around their servers, like it would have disrupted all their operations throughout the day. So like it just couldn't have happened, and it's like, okay, but like there's logical follow up questions to that, and Durham did not like give us the answers to it. It's like, okay, between this and all your other filings, it's like, okay, the CIA said it's not technically plausible. The FBI was talking about, whoever put this together is like a 5150 guy. And it's like, okay, well, is it fabricated, right? Like, that's the question. Were these logs of data from Alpha Bank or, purportedly from Alpha Bank and Donald Trump, these DNS lookups, these logs, are they fabricated? Like, that's the question. And Durham, like, he tiptoes around it. And he doesn't make a determination, because then the logical second question is like, okay, if they are fabricated, how is that not a crime? Like, and those are two questions he does not get into. And I I don't, at least I don't recall seeing it. Like, I don't recall seeing anywhere that the special counsel's office took a position on the authenticity of those logs. Maybe I missed it, but like some of those questions, and I just chose Alpha Bank because that's one where he was most active in court filings, obviously with the Sussman trial, and he was making this big overarching case, and he was throwing out all these like joint venture conspiracies, and there's you know CIA said it's not technically plausible, and he was giving us a bunch of new information, and then we get to the final report, and all these questions that came up, he just leaves them open. And I don't know. I'd be very curious on his explanation for that. I don't understand that.
I know he did have some information about, for instance, the Yoda phone accusation from the white papers, which I mean, I wrote about that. I think a lot of people looked at it, in tech experts, some people that I think are middle of the road people looked at it and went, this is ridiculous. Like, this is silly. And he did say that, no, what they provided was cherry picked. I mean, more or less, that was the conclusion, in my opinion, that Durham came back with, that no, they were not providing any kind of context. It was like, yes, there were these hits from this website, but compared to what? Durham did seem to mention that it was like, no, it was, if you looked at it on a global scale, it wasn't unusual, that they made it seem like it was something unique to the Trump, connected to Trump somehow, but it wasn't. And I don't have it in front of me to look at, but I know he did talk about that, which was good, because I immediately, when I read those white papers, I was like, my first instinct was, compared to what? You're saying, oh, this is something outrageous, is something unique, compared to what? What are you telling me, that they're pinging this website so many times, but are you saying that a different server wouldn't have that over a certain period of time? And I think Durham did come back with some information on that, so that was good. But you're absolutely right, Undead, that should beg the question of why. Okay, next step, why are you feeding us garbage, and what does that mean? And is there some crime tangential to that might, that you are feeding us something that has a reason behind it that might be criminal? I don't know.
Yeah, see, I mean, it's not like, I don't like my prosecutors to leave things open ended. Like, when we have a special counsel out there, I want answers. I don't want him to give us breadcrumbs. I don't want him to leave it ambiguous for, it's not supposed to be in the eye of the beholder. Like, he puts out all this information, and making sense of it, it's not supposed to be up to us. Like, we need his conclusions, we need his analysis, and his opinions carry a lot of weight. I mean, is there something wrong there or not? Like, that's what we hired you to do. Like, that's and I made this statement to Shipwreck the other day, where I was like, it feels like he left this open on his report, and we've come to expect from special counsels like these big, long narrative reports that tell us what happened. And it did not feel like he did that. Like, he gave us some facts, he gave us a little bit more color on a few topics, and then he just left open so many questions. And we have FOIA documents, right? And I've talked about this and I've tweeted about it. We have these really interesting FOIA documents that kind of indicate that, some of these same researchers on the AlphaBank scandal and on the Yoda phone allegations were actually giving work product to Special Counsel Mueller and or the Department of Justice. And that may have included information on the hack of the DNC. And like, give us the answers on that. Like, we have the email, and I would be a little bit surprised if John Durham does not know that this email is in the public domain by now, where it's like, Durham's team was asking this researcher about if he thought it was appropriate for DARPA to task him to look at Guccifer 2.0. And it's like, okay, you're asking him about that. He's involved. You looked at Guccifer 2.0. Like, tell us more about that. And that's crazy. He totally leaves that open and out of his report. And I don't know what that means. Um, you know, if Durham's asked about that at this hearing, what is he going to say? Like, I just really struggle to reconcile it. And I'll apologize in advance because I'm going to say the same thing. I'm going to make that same point probably 10 more times tonight because I just don't understand. Um, but yeah, I mean, I didn't, I've read through this report. I mean, there's nothing new. I mean, nothing big anyway. I mean, there's no bombshell. Like, there's no answers. There's questions about Pianka, FBI agent Pianka, and Durham certainly goes into the FBI a little bit, but he doesn't give us more color on Pianka insofar as he was aware of the counterintelligence investigation to Sergei Milian in October 2016, and Pianka was aware of these allegations from Simpson brought to Bruce Orr in December 2016, saying that Milian was actually the primary subsource. And it's like, okay, Durham, you got to tell us about that. Like, what's going on there? Why didn't Pianka raise that? Like, why didn't that show up in the FISA application? I thought that was a really interesting point. I think he was talking about Pianka, where Pianka apparently got really upset when he found out about this purported Clinton plan that everybody knew about, and apparently Pianka didn't know. And people may not remember this, but Pianka actually quit. Like he quit the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. I think it was February 2017, and basically he had like interviewed Flynn, and then by then he was so fed up with this like political nonsense that he quit. He just asked to be taken off this investigation entirely. So it does make sense a little bit that he might have been upset when he found out that there's these allegations about this special plan from Hillary Clinton, and but even there, Durham leaves it open. Like, and that's why we sort of need congressional hearings. Like, okay, it's time to bring in Pianka. Like, have Pianka up there, have him testify, and tell us why is he emotional about that, right? Like, what's going through his head? Like, what does he think is the truth about what happened? And hopefully we get there. Hopefully we get some hearings, and it's not just going to be bring in Durham, grandstand for half an hour, and everybody moves on.
Yeah, I agree. And I think another big question that everybody had was if you look through all the footnotes, if you go through the report and you'll see the footnotes, and when they're talking about all these different players, and they'll say, so and so refused to cooperate with the special counsel. And it'd be great if we could get, maybe King wants to come up and talk about like what the special counsel is able to do to compel people to testify, which basically you'd have to bring them in front of a grand jury. And then that opens up a whole can of worms where, all right, now you're in front of a grand jury, and these people will, apparently they've, signaled through their lawyers, I'm sure, that they're going to plead the Fifth Amendment, so they're not going to talk. And the only way to get them to talk at that point is to give them immunity. It's underneath the grand jury auspice, and therefore it's going to be held in secret. And it's almost, it's very, very difficult to get grand jury testimony out into the public. So that was something else that Durham was dealing with. But that being said, these are all the key players that in order for John Durham to do his job, he needs to be able to talk to these people. And if they're all just refusing to cooperate, right up into, Clyde Smith, who, had been indicted and took a deal, the fact that he wouldn't cooperate, it's like, what, you gave someone a deal and then he wouldn't answer questions for you? Like, the cart was clearly before the horse there. So I just find that, I think everybody found that like, wow, great. So, we're not getting answers out of anyone. You can't compel testimony. Maybe he took some of these people in from the grand jury and we just don't know about it, but that's really harsh. That if you look through, and these are like all the people, you name a name that you think was a potentially a dirty player in this, and they probably did not cooperate, did not testify, did not talk to John Durham. So that's really harsh.
Is there anything else that you see coming, or is there anything else like? How do you think this hearing's going to go with Durham up there? I mean, do you think anything's going to come out of it, or do you think Congress is going to actually do anything?
I always, and we've talked about this all the time on Dead, but I have the lowest regard for these hearings because the public ones are just terrible. They're always each guy gets 5 minutes and they go back and forth between a Republican and a Democrat, and they started out with 3 minutes of, back in my district, my people are really concerned about X, Y, and Z, and blah blah blah, and they burn half their time just talking about nonsense, and they really, and if you wanted to do this right, you could do it. You could make all your people give all their time to one person and have them actually burn down through things. And you can't find anything out in 5 minutes. It's just not going to happen. But if they gave all their time to, Jordan or whoever he wanted to appoint to actually like spend half an hour getting through things. And I think that happens behind closed doors more often where, they do the ones that are, in secret or, that they're not open to the public, then they can actually drill through things. But it's so bad. It's just, it's anyone, I know a lot of people like me watch C-SPAN and just sit through these things that are they're appalling. And it's 5 minutes, 3 minutes are burned by the Republican talking about nonsense. And the Republican comes on and just burns down the witness and just says, hey, there's a Twitter account called John Durham at John Durham. Is that you? No, it's not me. Well, he said this. Do you agree with it? I don't know. That's 5 minutes gone. So yeah, I have very little hope for, hopefully there'll be some tidbits and some things we can dig through, but I do not have high hopes for this particular thing. I do hope that they use it as a jumping off point, like you said, where they actually subpoena some people, bring them in, put them under oath. If they want to plead the fifth, fine, but at least make them do that and get some, hopefully they can get some more answers doing something like that.
Yeah, I would agree. I thought that initial tweet that was out there about bringing in Durham at 9 a.m. on Thursday, I really hope they redo that. I mean, that's just nonsense, right? You can't tell everybody in the country like this is the worst thing, in history, and then bring in John Durham at 9 a.m. while everybody's working so nobody watches it. Like it's either the most important thing in history and you bring him in for prime time or you don't, or you just totally ignore it. Like I would rather them start later, do a primetime hearing, and like, yeah, it is going to be a problem. Like if you do a 3 hour hearing, an hour and a half of it is just Democrats, you know, doing some garbage, whatever they're going to do. I'm sure they have some strategy, and that's the one thing that Democrats do really well is, have these really organized, hearings where everybody sort of builds on each other, and or at least it seems that way more often than not. And they're going to try to make Durham look stupid, right? They're going to try to make him look corrupt. They're going to seize on that New York Times report saying that, Durham ignored evidence of wrongdoing by Donald Trump, and they're going to go through that, and there will be no substantive questions from the Democrats whatsoever. So out of a 3 hour hearing, an hour and a half of it is just going to be garbage, and then like another 20 minutes is going to be killed by like groundless bickering back and forth when the Democrats are being disrespectful and cutting people off and doing, whatever garbage motions and stuff that they're going to do. That's going to eat up like at least 20 minutes. And then you're going to have your grandstanders on the Republican side. You're going to have people that didn't do the work, or they didn't have their staff actually look at the documents and go and do research. So they're not going to be prepared. And then you're going to have like one or two people that probably have an idea what's going on, and the pressure's going to be on them to actually ask the questions and try to figure out what the heck is going on. So I have really, really low expectations. I really hope they do move it to prime time though, because there is still a chance. There is a chance that, at least one member of Congress is going to go out there and do some research, find our FOIA documents, and ask the questions that need to be asked. And maybe they even bring our FOIA documents in there. That's what I really hope for, quite honestly. I think our FOIA documents would be great props. Like, throw them up on the big screen, throw them up for everybody to see, and then ask your question. And I think that'd be a really powerful way to do it. And you know what? If it comes off as a little bit confrontational with John Durham for the Republicans, that's fine. Like, Durham sort of opened himself up for that when he put in a report like this where it just doesn't give us detail. Like, you can't withhold information like that and then be upset if people start grilling you a little bit. So I'm sure Durham's going to handle it really well, and hopefully Republicans do that.
No, I agree, and I think Durham knows that that is probably what's going to happen and is fine with it, because the way he laid things down was absolutely that there were a lot of things left out, and they're going to be asking questions that are, he may say they're outside his scope, and they may well be, but he may have answers. And so if you came across things that are outside the technical scope, that doesn't mean that, if there are crimes, certainly he could refer them to other prosecutors. But I don't know if they may not have been crimes, but they may have been, things that are of public interest. He should talk about them. He should say, no, I didn't, we didn't feel like this rose to the level of crime, but we found out this information and you're asking me this question, I'll answer it. And what's the attorney general going to do at that point? Like, John Durham's, he's retired. He's, this is his last hurrah. I really hope he takes the opportunity to stretch. And I know he's an honorable man. He's going to be as ethical as he can, but that doesn't mean that you can't, if you found out things that are of public interest that are, maybe not criminal, but he should talk about them. And these are the things, Undead, that we're talking about, that I hope that the congressmen have teed up, that they can come to him and say, hey, what about this? What about this? Here's this email. Can you explain this? Do you have more context? Can you tell us anything about it? That he will answer that question. We'll see. That could be very interesting. And I do think that could happen, because, like I said, the idea that Garland turned around his report in over a weekend without any redactions or without having him change anything, I really think there's more. He knows a lot more that he might be willing to talk about that couldn't make it in the report. He wanted that report to get out without a big fight, without it being going to court at the end of things. So maybe that's his strategy, that, okay, I will get my report out and then I'll talk to Congress. And I hope that's true. I don't know if that this was going to happen, but we'll see.
Yeah. And not just our FOIA documents, they could almost pull up Durham's own court filings and use those as props too, because I think there's actually areas where Durham went further in court filings than he did in his final report. And you and I have talked a lot about data privacy and the potential for, the hope, at least, for some legislation there out of Congress, because Durham had these filings where he was talking about, the Alpha Bank researchers and people connected to them spying on the executive office of the presidency. And I didn't really see that revisited in his final report. And that seems like a ground right within the domain that you just outlined, where, Durham didn't put it in his report necessarily, but Durham knows more, right? And that's a substantive question where I think we're owed an answer. And that's where, all those news reports came out where it's like, oh, Durham had to walk this back because, conservative media was running with it, and it's not, he didn't mean it that way or whatever. Like, he didn't really revisit that and tie that up to see, like, okay, did somebody embellish it, or did he misstate it? Or, there's so many examples where he didn't give us the answers. He didn't tie things up in a neat little bow and sort of clean up some things, and even some things that he sort of created, like if there's a controversy there, Durham sort of created it, and maybe it was accidental, but we deserve to know, like, what is the extent of spying that happened using this data? Like, the Alpha Bank data, how was it purchased, right? Whose contract, like, whose money went and purchased that data that they mined for dirt against President Trump? That's what I want to know. Like, is it this DARPA contract? Which DARPA contract was it? Like, who's the overseer of it? How did they submit money or submit reimbursements, or how did that all proceed? I know there was a referral there related to DARPA, it looked like, or the Department of Defense, and Georgia Tech, it looked like. But like, you got to give us more information, and that's another classic example where that's information within his head that he didn't put down on paper for us, and I think it would go a long way if Durham would answer those questions, though I don't expect him necessarily to.
Yeah, we'll see. And that's another interesting thing, that he did refer some things to the IG of the Department of Defense based on the DARPA stuff. And I would think that Congress should be red hot about some of these things, unless they knew about it, which they may well have and not cared and whatever. But, just the DARPA stuff that those FOIAs have uncovered is outrageous. That, the DOJ is using the Department of Defense to basically spy on American citizens and sidestepping the intelligence community that we consider to, use the Department of Defense. I mean, that's 20 years ago, that would be a huge scandal, like unbelievable. And now it's just, again, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, okay, well, that happened. I don't know. I really hope that Congress, grows a pair and starts to take some of their power back and say, look, this is our bailiwick to decide, who gets funding, who gets, and Congress, obviously they've devolved a lot of their authority and their power over the years, especially. And I think this might be an opportunity to say, look, this is crazy. We're spying on the American people. This was just one little tidbit that we happened to catch of the DOJ saying, hey, Department of Defense, do a favor for us, because we don't want to go to the FISA court. We don't want to use our own power to investigate. See if you can find some stuff out for us and slide it back to us on the sly. That's crazy, but that's what happened.
Yeah, and we've talked about, the Department of Justice issued these taskings that flowed through DARPA to these Alpha Bank researchers, and we saw that apparently on Russiagate itself, but then we saw it on non-Russiagate stuff. We saw it on the I think it was the Tree of Life synagogue shooting, where within a couple hours, the tasking flowed from, a U.S. attorney through the FBI to DARPA to Georgia Tech to pull information on the cyber activities of the shooter online and like pull their history or whatever, work product it is. And it's like, okay, like, that might be like a good example where it's like, okay, yeah, everybody wants to know it, but it's like, are they getting a warrant? In other cases, like, is this warrantless data collection? Are they abiding by FISA? Are they abiding by, the Fourth Amendment? And, I'm really troubled by some reports out there. And I think Senator Wyden really did a good job of raising this, where it's like, is this warrantless data collection? Is it the government's position that this is not subject to Fourth Amendment protections? And I did see that somewhere. And that has massive ramifications for everybody if the government can just buy commercial data, and we have evidence of that as well, and then just, start mining through it for whatever, flags or whatever signatures that they want, and then take that and use it as evidence to go get warrants or to go get more information against people. I think that's troubling. And it's troubling, you just don't have the chain of custody on the evidence, and you have no idea if there is tampering there, who's going to find it,
This is stuff that we happen to find more so Undead and through these FOIAs, but this wasn't stuff that was, hey, here's how we do things now. These are things that we unexpectedly found through investigations and that were never supposed to be public and never would have been. And that's the horrible part, is that it was done on the sly. It was done in ways that we never would have known about. So what we know, the things we know, but the unknown unknowns are even scarier. And if this is the government, if this is just how they're doing things right now, what have we not uncovered? I'm sure there are things that are just as bad or worse that uh, are out there that they're violating all kinds of privacy rights and constitutional rights. I just find that outrageous, and I hope that Congress would feel like, hey, we're being left out of the loop here. This is the executive branch basically taking over everything, not testing anything in courts. Do we know if this is a violation of the Fourth Amendment? Well, we can't know because nobody knows it's happening. Nobody's taking it to court to find out. We don't find out until they get caught. So where do we go from there?
Yeah, and we just saw a report, I think it was this week, that came out that the FISA database was being searched thousands of times for information, derogatory information on January 6th defendants. And it's like, that's not really the purpose of FISA, right? Like that's not what we had envisioned at all. And then going back to our point earlier, where it's like John Durham did not give us the answers one way or the other. It's not like, on certain topics, it's like he didn't tell us everything was bad, but he didn't tell us everything was fine either. And the DNC hack is another example of that, where it's like, did he even look at it? And we had like indications that he's looking at the DNC hack when we were talking about that email from the Georgia Tech researcher. But how much did he look at it? And it's really troubling to me that he raises this Clinton plan and he pieces this all together where it's like, okay, the Steele dossier is garbage. The Alpha Bank stuff is out there, the Yodaphone allegations, and all, he didn't even talk about Project Birmingham or anything like that was going on. But then it's like, okay, is the DNC hack part of that scheme too? Or did Hillary Clinton and her operatives affect a plan to make it look worse than it was? Is that what happened? And Durham owed us a conclusion on that. Whether it's criminal or non-criminal, he should have come out and said, like, okay, Hillary Clinton affected this plan to build on what the Russians were actually doing. Or he should have said, I looked at it and the Russians did or did not, do this and this and this. And like the indictment against the Internet Research Agency, I think that's totally blown up. I mean, it just looks like total garbage now. And, you had these Democrat operatives that were setting up fake Russian bot accounts on Twitter and, and more on, Matt Taibbi's reporting. It's like, there really wasn't this big influence campaign. And if there wasn't an influence campaign, and if there wasn't collusion campaign, why would the Russians just go and hack a political party and hack the DNC and then dump the emails and then do nothing else? And it really seems like, and it feels like it should be a holistic package. It's like either there was a big influence campaign by Russia that included a hack and dump of information, or it's all a false flag operation. Like you can't, like splitting the baby a little bit and saying, okay, yeah, the Russians did this hack and they did this hack and dump to influence the election, but all the influence stuff, no, that was just actually garbage. And that's really like where we're at right now. And that goes to the point where it's like Durham just did not tell us how much he did on the DNC hack. He didn't give us conclusions. He didn't, and I referenced it on the first point that I made. It's like Seth Rich stuff. I put no credence in that whatsoever. But he should have looked at the Seth Rich stuff, and he should come out and say, there's nothing to it, right? Seth Rich had nothing to do with it. Let's kill all the conspiracy theorists that involve, Seth Rich. Let's put it to bed. And I think he had a responsibility to do that as special counsel. It wasn't just as a prosecutor, can I bring charges, can I not? He owed us answers on questions that were not necessarily criminal in nature. And he failed that. He failed that second aspect miserably. And now we're heading to this hearing, hopefully in prime time. And, hopefully he's going to be put under a microscope and have to answer some of those questions.
I think King's in here.
Yeah. Hey, King, how you doing?
Good evening. How are you guys doing?
Good. It's been a long time.
I'm fine. I know
Really
it has been
good.
forever. Undead, along the what you were saying, I want to add something. By way of breadcrumbs, Durham did give us a couple more breadcrumbs that fill in some of the gaps into what the Clinton plan was and how it operated. And that came out of the mouth of Hillary Clinton herself. You have to read between the lines a little bit, but he paraphrased what she said when he interviewed her. She said, we had all kinds of plans, contingency plans about how to deal with the campaign and with Trump. But she kind of indicated most important was they were willing to use whatever the press said and take that and run with it, true or not. But that it basically, if it's in the press, it's fair game, and we can go, run with that to the cows come home. That's pretty much a accurate description of what they did with Russiagate. The press clippings and the press pronouncements they made actually began in April, maybe March or April of 2016, calling Trump a Russian stooge of some kind, or somehow being in bed with Putin. Not citing any evidence really, but from those little snippets, that story got bigger and bigger and bigger until the DNC hack happened, and then you had the convention at which in late July, at which Robbie Mook made the infamous statement in a press conference that yes, indeed, we believe our experts tell us, experts, mind you, tell us that Trump is in league with Russia. So that to me described the plan, gave you ammunition. If you're a prosecutor, gave you sufficient ammunition to go look to see if indeed they had hatched it that early, and started implementing it by feeding their friendly press with stories and tidbits and whatnot until the end of July when they finally went full blast. So that's a breadcrumb that we didn't have before. The fact that it came out of Hillary's mouth is very significant. And why Durham stopped at that point, I don't understand. Maybe it's something he didn't think he could put in a report and pass it by Garland, or maybe he decided that it wasn't worth the candle to give somebody immunity to force them to tell the story, the bigger story, before the grand jury. But he basically stopped. There was laying gift wrapped for him by Hillary Clinton herself. And he didn't interview her until the very end. I forget the date, but it was shortly before, I think it was the Sussman trial.
Yep.
So,
see, when you make that point, which I think is a great point, as you said it, my mind immediately turned to the DNC hack, because that announcement was not made by the U.S. government. That was pushed out there by Hillary Clinton in a massive media operation where, on July 14th or June 14th, 2016, like all of a sudden, this is blasted out that the Russians hacked the DNC and the Russians are trying to influence this, the election. And all that came from Hillary. And that's not me just speculating. Like, go find all those articles. And, article after article, they all quote Clinton people. They quote, Jake Sullivan. They quote, whoever, Alperovich. And it's like, that was pushed out there by Hillary Clinton. And we have this disparity and this unanswered question because the evidence, the actual technical data and server logs and the images of those compromised servers did not make it to the FBI until October. And we know that because of exhibits that have come up at trial where in the middle of October, the the FBI finally got around to asking Michael Sussman, who was the point man for the DNC. They asked him if CrowdStrike or if the FBI could go image the compromised servers finally. And I've made this point before, but it's like, if you think about everything that had happened by October, they'd opened Crossfire Hurricane. They were applying for a FISA warrant against Carter Page already. They'd actually applied for one and been denied a few weeks prior. They had all these, investigations open. They had already spent millions of dollars by that point, and they hadn't taken the first initial step of verifying that the DNC was actually hacked or was even hacked by Russia. They had done nothing. They had zero work done on that whatsoever. And yet, a few days before they had actually started asking for the data, they had already released a statement, a joint statement from ODNI and DHS attributing the hack to Russia, and they had zero evidence from CrowdStrike. They had zero evidence from the DNC. That's an open question that we hope is still going to be asked, because they had no evidence that servers had been hacked. They had no evidence from the servers, and yet they had gone along with this plan already. And that's what came to mind as you laid out that point, that sort of Hillary Clinton was driving this through the media and then relying back on the media stories that she put out as like justification for what she was saying. And it's like, yeah, well, that also applies to the DNC hack, and that makes me really uncomfortable, and that just goes further into the question of why didn't Durham look at it, or why didn't he include it in his report?
And I would add, it didn't stop with the hack. We know from news articles and leaks and whatnot that the FBI was the intelligence agency which pushed vigorously for a finding that that Putin interfered with the election for the express purpose of getting Trump elected. That was their horse they were riding. There was some debate inside the CIA that on the other side of that, but the Brennan and his team won out, and so they bought in with the Comey crowd. But even Brennan was not willing to go so far as to attach the Steele dossier as an integral component of the ICA report that was made public, but they attached it as an exhibit, despite the fact that Steele, even having been offered $1 million, couldn't verify a single thing in it. So start with the design to create publicity around a theory that Putin is backing Trump in this election, and he's actively trying to interfere, and then take it all the way through the campaign and post-election into the formal ICA. And you have pretty much some insiders at the very top of FBI and possibly the CIA who know better, because they know about the Clinton plan, as Durham calls it. And they know the Clinton plan has not been investigated, but all of the public, if you look at the public evidence, the newspaper articles, the timeline of the hack and the Alpha Bank story, and everything the Clinton campaign did to push this narrative, this looks like a Hillary Clinton campaign operation that they're going to blame Russia for. But it was obviously, if that's true, it would have been exceedingly important for those at the top to make sure that the public understood it that way. Otherwise, they all may go to jail. Again, those are rocks Durham never even tried to turn over, and I don't understand it.
Well, that's actually what I
King,
kind of wanted to ask you about a little bit more from a legal perspective. I mean, you know, how much probable cause does he really have to have if he wants to go subpoena people and get their testimony and force them to testify to a grand jury? I mean, if he has a reasonable suspicion that there's a conspiracy to influence the election or, whatever goal that a conspiracy might have, then there seems to be several he could have chosen. I mean, if people just don't want to testify, and we saw that throughout the report, I mean, he can either give them immunity. I mean, there's options that he has, right?
Well, he had grand juries open, so he had sufficient predicate to open grand juries to investigate and potentially prosecute criminal activity. And it was up to him. He had discretion at that point to decide how far to take it. Do we turn over every rock like Mueller's team tried to do, or do we do a licking a promise and then shut it down without really pressing people, like the people who won't talk to us? The way you handle that in a grand jury is you decide who is most likely to squeal on the whole crowd, give that person immunity, and call him before the grand jury and ask him to tell his side of the story and find out if there's evidence out there that would implicate the others who haven't been immunized in a criminal scheme. He could have done that once he got his grand jury going, but he didn't.
yeah, that was exactly my question, King. That we didn't hear from, and okay, all right, maybe you wouldn't go and drag in Comey or some of these top level people that would make a big stink and it'd be a public issue, but there were a lot of guys like Kleinsmith or Priestep that didn't have this notoriety in public. Could they have been brought in front of the DC jury or the Eastern Virginia grand jury? Was there an issue with is it too tangential? Is there someone that can say, no, you can't do this because it's not directly enough related to what you're bringing for the Sussman trial or for the Enchenko trial? Is there anything that they could object to based on that it's just too tangential?
That's not, you can't win a trying to get out of a grand jury subpoena on that basis. My guess is every one of the people who refused to cooperate with Durham would have pled the fifth and may have told Durham's team that's what they would have done had they been asked to testify before a grand jury. At that point, Durham's only option is to decide whether or not to immunize any of them, to force them to come and testify to the grand jury. Once you're immunized, you can't disobey a subpoena. You've got to come and testify and tell the truth.
And why don't you think he did that, other than just deciding to close everything down and not? And maybe he did, and maybe it didn't bear out anything. But how do you think we got here without him doing that?
Your guess is as good as mine. I do not know.
Okay. I was hoping you would pull some magic and have an answer for that one, because that's like the key question, and I don't understand it.
I've seen some skilled prosecutors do exactly what I'm describing,
Yep.
and they use that technique to bust up some big, serious criminal conspiracies. Because white collar conspiracies, I would add. One feature of it is the immunized witness knows that if he gets caught in a lie in his testimony, he's going to jail. He's not immunized. His immunization does not cover lying to the grand jury. So if he's given immunity, it's in his or her interest to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth. He can fight the prosecutor, or be as uncooperative as he thinks he can, but he can't lie. And a good cross examiner, particularly one who's got the background facts, knows the documents in and out, has a witness or two in his pocket that he knows some of what went on, he can get a person to spill his guts before a grand jury.
My second question is the inability of Durham to break the attorney-client privilege between Perkins Coie, Fusion, whoever else. That there's a bunch of footnotes in Durham's report about that. Unfortunately, we couldn't. This was privilege, and this was considered privilege, and he didn't break that. Do you have? What do you think about that? What's your comments on?
My comments said. I'll repeat what I said back at the time. I don't think he aggressively sought to bust attorney-client privilege. He could have, using the crime fraud exception, like they did with January 6th, Trump's lawyers. He didn't even try that. He should have early on. Now, if you can try it and lose it, but you ought to at least try. He didn't do that. And failing that, he still has the immunity weapon in his back pocket that he could have used. And on the issue of whether that's beyond the scope of what the grand jury is looking at, it's precisely within the scope. Both grand juries, Danchenko and Sussman, were looking at a campaign-related or sponsored plan to obstruct the FBI, feed them false information. So it's the same scheme that he's investigating.
Well, I also struggle with it because, yeah, he was really, really slow to even try, and maybe he was relying way too much on the Alpha Bank civil suit. But when they got to the Sussman trial, they got near it. They actually got Judge Cooper to look at documents in camera. And I don't recall what it was. It might have been like 40 documents. And then Judge Cooper came back and he was like, at least half of these have no basis for privilege at all. And he, I think generously accepted the privilege claims on their face for some of the other documents mostly because of the proximity to the trial, and ruled that a few couldn't be admitted and what have you. But I mean, shouldn't John Durham have been able to take that and say to another grand jury, like, okay, they've been asserting these privilege claims over all these documents. A judge just looked at 40 of these documents. At least 20 of them are completely frivolous, and we're going to argue that the other 20 are equally, frivolous. Why don't we, get more documents? Or why couldn't he use that and go get more documents?
As I understand it, he only presented the documents to Judge Cooper that he thought might be relevant, that he might want to use in the Sussman case, in the trial itself. Right. He didn't go beyond that. And if his investigation had gone beyond that, he should have done precisely what you said. That only addresses the issue is, are they improperly invoking privilege as to certain documents? Because these were sent to the press, they were sent to third parties. That makes them, by definition, non-privileged. But even broader than that is the crime fraud exception, which destroys privilege altogether. Everything is discoverable at that point. And he had evidence of crimes. And the bar is not, there's a bar he has to jump over to get the chief judge in where the grand jury is sitting to hold that there was sufficient crime to bust the privilege, but he didn't try.
Yeah, and I think that's the other. That's like of the so many different points that bother me. That's one of them because that seems like it's really really easy to do by that point because then you can go to a grand jury and say, look, they've been fighting me this whole time. They've been asserting privilege claims over all these documents. Finally we had a judge, in this other case, look at 40 documents, and we've shown that the privileges are being made in bad faith, or the privilege claims are being made in bad faith. We'd like to go, get more documents, and they could have pierced it several different ways, as you said. I mean, even the emails that he was able to get admitted to trial, and that Judge Cooper admitted after being them in camera, as you said, I mean, some of those were just emails from Fusion GPS to like media people, and it's like, no, there's no privilege claim to assert over that. Like, you're literally talking to a third party about this information. You're forwarding pieces of this white paper. Like, there's no privilege whatsoever. It's totally frivolous. And Durham should have been able to take that fact pattern back to a grand jury to go get the rest of the documents. And that's one of the things that really really bothers me. I just can't reconcile it, and I can't defend Durham not doing that and not getting those documents.
I think that's a great question for Congress. I hope that somebody brings that up in these hearings and asks them, why did you not pursue this further after you were messed with this ridiculously, and you had all the ammunition and you didn't take it further?
But I would add also, when in talking to Congress, that Durham was cognizant of the precise element of this plan that Hillary admitted to, because Durham gathered up all of those reach outs to the press by Fusion GPS, trying to peddle the Alpha Bank hoax, which is pretty much in line with how Hillary said her plan would operate.
Yeah, and it's just very interesting that she said, "We'll go with whatever the press says," when they were feeding the. I mean, this is the point. They were feeding the press these statements, these accusations, and then Hillary says, "Well, we'll go along with what the press says." Yeah, because you were telling them what to say.
It's just silly. I mean, it's not even defensible. It's just so silly. I like this is something that I'm probably going to struggle with for a couple of years to reconcile if John Durham doesn't give us anything new, and I certainly don't expect him to give us anything new in this hearing. And it's really going to come down like citizen journalism. I mean, that seems to be what this is going to come down to, is a bunch of people like tracking down documents, tracking down witnesses, and getting them on the record. Because and like everything we've done, I never thought it'd be us in that position, but it like that. I think it's a big credit for what we've been trying to do over the last few years and keeping this in the public conversation. And lo and behold, I mean, I said it earlier. I mean, there's stuff that we know. There's stuff that I know. There's stuff that Walk of Fire knows. There's stuff that Fool Nelson knows, and so many others that is just not addressed in these reports. And maybe we're wrong about everything. I don't know, but like I can't reconcile it, and I don't know where this is going to circle back to. Like I don't know what's going to anchor a future investigation. Like, and I made the point earlier. Like, what happens when one of us come up with the next big story? Because it's coming. Like the truth is going to come out, and Durham's going to look horrible, and I hate that for him. But sort of is what it is at this point, I guess. You guys have anything else?
No, I think we hit some really good points, and I do hope that Congress asked Durham. I think Durham. I'm more on the side of I think he did a lot of things that he could do, and I think there are big questions for him though that I hope he will answer in that forum. Why did you not immunize these people? Uh, why did you not break these attorney-client privileges? And some of the more specific questions about what was happening with the Clinton campaign. I hope he answers those questions. I hope that they are asked. That's the main thing. But other than that, those are my main takeaways.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, some of those topics, topic specific. I mean, certainly my big interest is in, these Alpha Bank researchers being also associated with the DNC hack investigation and at least that's to some degree, Special Counsel Mueller. And on both sides, I think there's valid questions to be asked. I'm not even saying there's something wrong or that anybody did something wrong, but it's like that's a basic question. Like you find that out, you have to ask about it. And I'm certainly surprised Durham didn't include that in this report. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if anybody else has anything. We'll certainly be doing a couple more of these. I mean, we've been at this for a few years, so a few more Spaces chats is no big deal. Hopefully they confirm this hearing with John Durham, and then hopefully it's in prime time. And if it's in prime time, I'm going to try to get MB and King and as many people as I can. We'll do like a stream of the hearing, and we'll try to get like everybody's thoughts before the stream. And if they do breaks, we'll troll them a little bit on the breaks, and then maybe we'll have some wrap up analysis after that. I think that'd be kind of cool to do. But King, do you have anything else?
That's all I have. I think
Okay.
you've got a good start here.
Yeah. Well, it's gonna take some time to process, but I think tonight was pretty cool. It's been a really long time since we've done one of these, so thank you, MB. Thank you, King. It's always great to hear you guys, and I guess we'll wrap this up here, and we will pick this up later. So I'll see you guys later. Hope everybody has a good night. See you.
Night. Thanks.